Have you ever wondered what secrets lie beneath the floorboards of America's oldest homes? What whispers might echo through the walls of abandoned mansions, carrying the weight of tragedies long forgotten? What would you do if you discovered that the beautiful antique wedding dress you purchased at an estate sale came with its original owner, still inside it? Before we continue with this disturbing tale from Tennessee's darkest corners, take a moment to comment where you're watching from. This channel relies on your support to continue uncovering these hidden histories that others want buried forever. Subscribe now to join our community of truth seekers who refuse to let America's most chilling mysteries remain in the shadows. The discovery was made on April 7th, 1915, when construction workers began renovations on the old Blackwood estate in Bristol, Tennessee. The mansion, once belonging to one of the region's most prominent families, had stood abandoned for nearly 20 years before a wealthy industrialist from Nashville purchased the property with plans to restore it to its former glory. Thomas Harrington, aged 42, had made his fortune in the textile industry and had a passion for historical architecture. The Blackwood estate, with its Victorian design and sprawling grounds overlooking the misty Appalachian foothills, had caught his eye during a business trip to the area. Mr. Harrington was particular about maintaining the historical integrity of the house, recalled Edmund Parker, the foreman hired to oversee the renovations. He insisted we salvage as much of the original materials as possible, which is why we were careful when removing the old paneling in what used to be the master bedroom. According to official reports filed with the Bristol Police Department, 3 workers were removing wooden wainscoting from the east wall of the second-floor bedroom when they noticed an unusual hollow space behind the ornate panels. Thinking they had discovered a sealed chimney shaft or hidden storage area, not uncommon in homes of that era, they proceeded to widen the opening. What they found instead would shock the entire community and launch one of Tennessee's most perplexing cold cases. "I'll never forget the smell," Parker's statement continues. "Sweet but sickly, like flowers left too long in a vase of stagnant water. When Jenkins held up his lantern to the opening, we all went quiet. There was something white and flowing in there, like silk or satin catching the light. The workers immediately summoned the police. Bristol Police Chief Walter Monroe arrived with 2 deputies and a county physician, Dr. Samuel Grayson. Upon further investigation of the concealed chamber, they discovered the perfectly preserved body of a young woman, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years of age, dressed in an elaborate wedding gown of fine silk and lace. Her hands were positioned carefully across her chest, clutching a bouquet of dried roses and foxglove. A delicate veil covered her face, which, according to Dr. Grayson's initial examination, showed no signs of decomposition, despite the apparent age of the hidden room. "In my 30 years of medical practice, I have never witnessed anything like this," Dr. Grayson noted in his official report. "The body shows remarkable preservation, almost as if the young woman had been embalmed through some unknown method. Her skin retains elasticity, and there is no evident decay of tissue, which defies all natural processes. Most curiously, there is no immediately apparent cause of death. The condition of the body perplexed authorities. The sealed chamber had been bone dry, and the constant temperature within the thick walls of the old house had created conditions that somehow slowed the natural decomposition process. But even these factors could not fully explain the woman's nearly pristine state. More disturbing than the preservation was the attention to detail in her presentation. The bride had been carefully positioned, her wedding dress arranged in flowing folds around her body. Whoever had placed her there had treated the macabre scene with reverence, creating what one officer described as a shrine to eternal matrimony. No identification was found with the body, but a small gold locket hung around her neck, containing a lock of dark hair and the inscription, "Forever thine, E.B." As news of the discovery spread through Bristol and the surrounding communities, the authorities began the painstaking process of identifying the woman and determining how she came to be sealed behind the walls of one of the region's most prestigious homes. Her hair had been meticulously styled and adorned with a crown of dried flowers. The Blackwood estate had been built in 1873 by coal magnate Ezekiel Blackwood, who had made his fortune during the post-Civil War industrial boom. The family had been prominent in local society until a series of financial setbacks in the late 1890s led to their gradual decline. By 1900, the last of the Blackwoods had reportedly left Tennessee for opportunities further west, and the estate had remained unoccupied except for a caretaker who maintained the grounds until his death in 1910. The Blackwoods were once the social elite of Bristol, explained Harriet Donovan, the 78-year-old former housekeeper for the neighboring Caldwell family. Their summer balls were legendary, drawing guests from as far as Richmond and Atlanta. Ezekiel's son, Edward Blackwood, was being groomed to take over the family business, but there was talk of him being something of a disappointment to his father. Edward Blackwood, born in 1875, would have been in his 20s during the late 1890s, the period when the Blackwood fortune began to wane. County records showed that Edward had been engaged to marry Sophia Reynolds, the daughter of another prominent local family, but no marriage certificate had ever been filed. "I remember my mother speaking of the scandal," continued Mrs. Donovan. "The Reynolds girl disappeared just weeks before the wedding. Some said she had run off with another man. Others believed she had fled from marrying into a family whose fortune was clearly crumbling. The Blackwoods claimed she had taken ill and returned to her family in Virginia, but no one ever heard from her again." Was the woman in the wall Sophia Reynolds? The timing seemed to align, but without more evidence, investigators could not be certain. The Reynolds family had left Tennessee shortly after their daughter's disappearance, reportedly returning to their ancestral home near Richmond. Attempts to locate surviving family members proved difficult, as the Spanish influenza epidemic had claimed many lives in that region. The investigation took an unexpected turn when researchers discovered a series of journals kept by the estate's former groundskeeper, Silas Jenkins. The volumes, covering the period from 1893 to 1910, had been stored in the town library's historical archives after Jenkins's death, donated by a distant relative who had no interest in their contents. Jenkins' entries from the fall of 1898 revealed disturbing details. October 3rd, 1898. "The master has been in a state these past days. Miss Reynolds's continued absence has caused much speculation in town, but Mr. Edward insists she is merely visiting relatives. Yet I have seen the light in his study burning until dawn, and heard his pacing footsteps when the house should be silent. Something weighs heavily on the young master's mind." October 12th. The strange deliveries continue. Mr. Edward has materials brought to the house under cover of night: lime, unusual chemicals from the apothecary in Johnson City, and lengths of silk that he insists I tell no one about. He has forbidden entry to the east wing of the second floor, claiming renovations that I have not been instructed to oversee. October 20th. The sounds from the sealed room disturb my sleep. I hear Mr. Edward speaking softly for hours, though no one responds. Today I glimpsed him carrying armfuls of fresh flowers upstairs, roses and strange purple blooms I did not recognize. When questioned, he flew into a rage I had never witnessed before, threatening my position should I speak of what I had seen. November 2nd. Mr. Blackwood Sr. returns from his business travels tomorrow. Mr. Edward has completed whatever work occupied him these weeks. The east wing is now locked, and he has personally sealed the room with new paneling. He appears more composed, almost peaceful. When I inquired about Miss Reynolds' return for the wedding, he smiled strangely and said, "She waits for me still in her wedding finery. Some brides are patient beyond measure." These journal entries cast a sinister shadow over what had previously been considered a mysterious disappearance. Chief Monroe immediately ordered a more thorough examination of the body and the sealed chamber. Dr. Grayson, assisted by a forensic specialist from Knoxville, conducted a careful autopsy. Their findings, documented in a report dated April 12, 1915, indicated that the woman had indeed died of unnatural causes. Upon closer examination, we discovered evidence of foxglove poisoning, wrote Dr. Grayson. The presence of digitalis in her system at lethal levels suggests ingestion shortly before death. This aligns with the bouquet found clutched in her hands, which contained dried foxglove among the roses. The poison would have caused cardiac arrest after a period of dizziness, confusion, and visual disturbances. Death would have come slowly but inevitably. The report continued. More disturbing is evidence that the young woman was alive when first brought to the chamber. Scratch marks on the interior wall and broken fingernails suggest she awoke or regained lucidity after being placed there, and made desperate attempts to escape before succumbing to either the poison or lack of air in the sealed space. A gold ring found on her finger matched the description of the engagement ring Edward Blackwood had commissioned from a jeweler in Nashville, according to records obtained from the jeweler's archived ledgers. The inscription inside, E.B. to S.R. eternally, left little doubt about her identity. As investigators pieced together the evidence, a chilling narrative emerged. Edward Blackwood, facing both the collapse of his family's fortune and the possible abandonment by his fiancée, had apparently decided that if he could not have Sophia Reynolds in life, he would preserve her in death, a macabre tableau of the wedding that never took place. The preservation of the body is now better understood, Dr. Mo. Grayson's final report explained. The chamber walls were treated with a mixture of lime and arsenic compounds, common in taxidermy of the era. Additionally, we found evidence that the body had been treated with formaldehyde and other chemicals that Edward likely obtained through his father's industrial connections. The sealed, dry environment did the rest, creating conditions similar to natural mummification. But what had happened to Edward Blackwood? County records showed that he had left Tennessee with his father in 1900, supposedly relocating to Colorado to pursue mining interests there. No death certificate had ever been filed in either state, and the last known correspondence from Edward was a letter to the family lawyer in 1905, inquiring about the status of the Bristol property and insisting it remain untouched. "I shall return when circumstances permit," he wrote. "The house contains memories too precious to disturb." The case took another unsettling turn when investigators discovered a hidden compartment in the floor of Edward's former study. Inside was a collection of personal items belonging to Sophia. Hairbrushes, still containing strands of dark hair, handwritten notes, a diary, and several daguerreotypes showing a beautiful young woman with solemn eyes. Sophia's diary entries revealed a troubling progression in her relationship with Edward. Initial passages described him as attentive and devoted, but later entries showed growing concern. April 18th, 1898. Edward's jealousy becomes increasingly difficult to bear. Today he accused me of exchanging glances with Mr. Sullivan during church services. His grip on my arm left bruises that I must now conceal with long sleeves, despite the spring warmth. May 4th. Edward presented me with a necklace today, a beautiful thing of gold and sapphires that must have cost more than his dwindling accounts can afford. When I gently suggested it was too extravagant, his eyes grew cold. "Nothing is too good for my bride," he said. "You will wear it always, to show that you belong to me." The way he fastened it around my neck, so tight I could scarcely breathe, felt more like shackling than a lover's gift. June 21st. I have made my decision. I cannot marry Edward. His possessiveness has become frightening, and rumors of the family's financial ruin grow stronger each day. Father has agreed to break the engagement and return to Virginia, where Cousin Mary has invited me for an extended stay. I shall tell Edward tomorrow, after his father's departure for the coalfields. I pray he receives the news with dignity, though I fear his reaction. The final entry, dated September 30th, 1898, was brief and chilling. Edward has discovered my plans. He came to me tonight, calm in a way that terrified me more than his rages. He brought tea and spoke of our future with such certainty. We are bound together, he said, in this life and beyond. The tea tasted strange, bitter beneath the honey, he added. My vision blurs as I write these words. Something is wrong. I feel I must call for help, but my limbs are so heavy. The discovery of Sophia's diary confirmed what the physical evidence had suggested. Edward Blackwood had poisoned his fiancée when he learned of her plans to leave him, then created his twisted memorial to their union, preserving her as his eternal bride. The investigation into Edward's whereabouts after leaving Tennessee led to a series of dead ends and contradictory reports. A mining clerk in Denver recalled a man matching Edward's description who worked briefly for a silver operation in 1902, but he had used the name Edwin Blake. Hotel registers in various western cities showed similar aliases with handwriting that graphology experts believed matched Edward's. The last confirmed sighting came from a sanatorium in New Mexico, where a patient calling himself Edward Blackthorne had been treated for melancholia and nervous exhaustion in 1908. The attending physician's notes described the patient's disturbing fixation. Patient speaks constantly of his sleeping bride, awaiting his return. Describes in unsettling detail the preservation techniques used on deceased animals, and insists similar methods could maintain human beauty indefinitely. When questioned about these statements, patient becomes agitated, claiming he has pioneered methods of keeping love fresh beyond the grave. Recommend continued observation and restraint when necessary. The patient had escaped the facility during a fire that destroyed much of the East Wing in December 1908. Whether he perished in the blaze or managed to flee remained unclear, as several bodies recovered from the ruins were burned beyond identification. Chief Monroe officially closed the Blackwood Bride case in July 1915, concluding that Edward Blackwood had murdered Sophia Reynolds in a possessive rage, preserved her body in a grotesque wedding tableau, and later likely died under an assumed name in the New Mexico sanatorium fire. Sophia's remains were finally laid to rest in Bristol's Oakwood Cemetery with a simple headstone bearing her name, the dates 1877 to 1898, and the epitaph, "Finally at peace." The case might have faded into local legend were it not for a series of unusual occurrences that began shortly after the bride's discovery. Workers completing renovations on the Blackwood estate reported strange phenomena. Tools mysteriously relocated overnight, the scent of roses and foxglove in rooms where no flowers were present, and most disturbingly, the sound of a woman weeping behind walls where no chambers existed. 3 of the original workers who discovered Sophia's body suffered unusual accidents in the months following her reburial. Jenkins fell from a scaffold with no apparent cause and broke both legs. Parker developed an inexplicable skin condition that doctors likened to chemical burns, though he had come into contact with no such substances. The 3rd worker, Samuel Collins, was found unconscious in his home with traces of digitalis in his system, the same poison that had killed Sophia. He survived but could not explain how he had ingested the toxic substance. Thomas Harrington, who had purchased the estate, never moved in. After the completion of renovations, he sold the property at a significant loss to the Episcopal Diocese of Tennessee, which converted the mansion into a school for girls. The East Wing, including the bedroom where Sophia had been found, was repurposed as administrative offices, though staff consistently requested transfers away from those rooms, citing unexplained cold spots and the persistent feeling of being watched. In 1922, a young groundskeeper at the school made a disturbing discovery while clearing overgrown bushes near the property's old carriage house. Buried beneath decades of soil and roots was a steamer trunk containing men's clothing, personal papers, and a journal belonging to Edward Blackwood. The final entry, dated January 5, 1915, read, "I have felt her calling to me across the years and miles. My beloved grows impatient in her bridal chamber, disturbed by the passage of time. I journey home to Bristol now to ensure she remains undisturbed in her repose. The new owner must be discouraged from his renovations before my darling is revealed to unappreciative eyes. Soon, very soon, I shall rejoin her in our eternal union." The journal confirmed what some had begun to suspect. Edward Blackwood had not perished in the New Mexico sanatorium fire. He had survived and returned to Bristol just months before the discovery of Sophia's body. But no records existed of his presence in the town during that period, and no one reported seeing a man matching his description. A photograph found among the trunk's contents showed a gaunt, bearded man with hollow eyes, bearing only a passing resemblance to the handsome young Edward Blackwood of earlier portraits. On the back was written, "The Bridegroom Returns, 1914. The most troubling discovery, however, was a set of architectural drawings detailing the Blackwood estate's wall spaces and hidden passages, with one area circled in red ink, a sealed chamber in the west wing that mirrored the location where Sophia had been found. Scrawled across the drawing were the words, "A groom must rest near his bride." Chief Monroe, who had retired by this time, was consulted by his successor regarding the new evidence. A search warrant was obtained, and on February 12, 1923, police officers and construction workers opened the sealed wall in the West Wing bedroom. Inside, they discovered a second preserved body, that of Edward Blackwood, dressed in a formal wedding suit of 19th century style. Unlike Sophia, who had been positioned peacefully, Edward's body showed signs of self-inflicted preservation. Chemical burns on his hands suggested he had applied the embalming compounds to himself, and an empty bottle of foxglove extract was clutched in his right hand. Most disturbing was the realization that Edward had sealed himself into the wall space while still alive, apparently consuming the poison only after ensuring he could not escape. He had positioned himself directly opposite Sophia's former resting place, separated only by the central hallway of the mansion, eternal partners in a macabre architectural wedding. The discovery reignited public fascination with the case, leading to sensationalist newspaper coverage that portrayed Edward and Sophia as tragic figures in a Gothic romance rather than perpetrator and victim in a case of obsessive murder. Visitors flocked to Bristol, hoping to glimpse the infamous Blackwood Bride House, forcing the diocese to erect fences and hire guards to keep trespassers at bay. Edward's remains were not given the same respectful burial as Sophia's. By order of the county judge, his body was cremated and the ashes scattered in an undisclosed location to discourage macabre souvenir hunters and prevent any form of memorial that might glorify his actions. The Episcopal school continued operating in the mansion until 1941, when a fire of unknown origin destroyed much of the original structure. Rebuilding efforts preserved only the basic footprint of the house, with modern materials replacing the Victorian craftsmanship. The east and west wings, where the bride and groom had been entombed, were not reconstructed, leading many to speculate that the diocese wished to literally and figuratively close that chapter of the building's history. But even as the physical reminders of the Blackwood Bride case were erased, the story continued to evolve in unexpected ways. In 1967, an elderly woman named Clara Sullivan contacted the Bristol Historical Society with an account that cast new light on the decades-old mystery. Clara, then 87 years old, claimed to be the niece of William Sullivan, the man Sophia Reynolds had mentioned in her diary as the object of Edward's jealousy. According to family stories passed down from her uncle, William and Sophia had formed a genuine attachment in the months before her disappearance, meeting secretly when Sophia began to fear her fiancé's increasingly controlling behavior. Uncle William always believed that Edward had discovered their plans to elope, Clara stated in a recorded interview. Sophia had written to him the day she disappeared, saying she would meet him at the train station that night with whatever belongings she could carry. When she never arrived, he went to the Blackwood estate, but was turned away by Edward himself, who claimed Sophia had changed her mind about breaking the engagement and wished to be left alone to prepare for their wedding. William Sullivan had remained in Bristol for weeks afterward, convinced something terrible had happened to Sophia. He even approached the local sheriff with his suspicions, but was dismissed, the Blackwood family's influence ensuring that no investigation was launched into what was deemed a private matter between engaged couples. Eventually, threatened with arrest for harassment if he continued making accusations against the Blackwoods, Sullivan had left Tennessee. But he never forgot Sophia, and on his deathbed in 1938, he reportedly told Clara, "She's still there, in that house. I feel her presence every day of my life. She's waiting for someone to find her." Clara Sullivan's account added a poignant dimension to the already tragic story. The possibility that Sophia might have been saved had William's concerns been taken seriously. It also raised disturbing questions about how many in Bristol's upper society might have suspected the truth, but remained silent out of deference to the once powerful Blackwood name. The case took yet another turn in 1975 when renovations to expand the Bristol Public Library uncovered a hidden cache of documents in the building's foundation, papers that had apparently been concealed there by Chief Monroe before his death in 1928. Among the documents was a sealed letter addressed to whomever seeks the truth about the Blackwood bride, written in Monroe's hand and dated January 3rd, 1926. "I write these words knowing they may never be read. Yet my conscience demands I set down what I could not reveal while still serving as Bristol's chief of police." The Blackwood case was never truly solved, for the most disturbing aspects were concealed from public knowledge by mutual agreement between myself, Dr. Grayson, and Mayor Collins. The preservation of Sophia Reynolds's body could not have been accomplished by Edward Blackwood alone. The chemical processes used required knowledge beyond that of an amateur, no matter how obsessive. Dr. Grayson identified compounds in the preservation mixture that were experimental even for medical science of the time. Substances that would have been available only to someone with connections to research hospitals or university medical programs. More troubling still were the indications that the preservation began while Sophia yet lived. The distribution of chemicals in her tissues suggested slow introduction over time, as if she had been systematically poisoned with preservative agents for weeks before her final dose of foxglove. Such a process would have caused considerable suffering, yet no one reported Sophia showing signs of illness in the days before her disappearance. This leads to the most disturbing conclusion. Edward Blackwood did not act alone. He had an accomplice with medical knowledge who assisted in his grotesque project, someone who helped prepare Sophia's body and may have provided the specialized chemicals used in her preservation. Our investigation uncovered correspondence between Edward and a Dr. Marcus Finch, who had studied experimental preservation techniques in Europe before establishing a small private practice in Bristol in 1897. Finch disappeared from the town shortly after the Blackwoods left, and records indicate he resurfaced in Colorado around the same time Edward was known to be there. I believe Finch continued to assist Edward over the years, perhaps helping him perfect the techniques used to preserve himself when he returned to Bristol. The level of medical precision in Edward's self-preservation could not have been achieved without professional guidance. Most disturbing of all, is the possibility that Finch may have had other clients with similar obsessions. During our investigation, we discovered references to at least 3 missing women in communities where Finch established practices after leaving Tennessee. In each case, the disappearance was connected to a man of means who later left the area under mysterious circumstances. I present these facts now because I fear the full extent of this macabre practice may never have been uncovered. How many other preserved brides might lie sealed in walls across the country, victims of wealth, obsession, and perverted medical science? And how many Dr. Finch might still be offering their services to those wealthy enough to indulge their darkest desires? May God forgive me for not pursuing these questions more vigorously while I had the authority to do so. The influence of powerful families and my own desire to protect Bristol from scandal led me to close the case prematurely. I can only hope that someone braver than I will someday follow these threads to their conclusion. Chief Monroe's letter prompted a review of cold cases in several western states, focusing on missing women connected to wealthy men who had abandoned properties with unusual architectural modifications. While no further preserved brides were discovered, investigators did find evidence suggesting that Dr. Marcus Finch had continued his ghastly practice well into the 1920s. A journal recovered from a safety deposit box in Denver, rented under Finch's name and never closed, contained coded entries that forensic analysts believed documented at least 7 cases of client preservation services between 1900 and 1923. The final entry, dated October 12, 1923, read, "The art is perfected now. The Blackwood technique requires refinement no longer. I leave these notes for those who may continue the work should society ever advance enough to appreciate the beauty in preserving love beyond its natural conclusion. The clients have been satisfied, the subjects eternally patient." No trace of Dr. Finch himself was ever found. Some speculated that he became a victim of his own preservation techniques, while others believed he assumed a new identity and continued his work under a different name. Medical licensing boards across the country reviewed their records for practitioners with suspicious backgrounds or unusual specializations, but the trail had grown too cold to follow with any certainty. The Blackwood bride case officially remains closed, catalogued among Tennessee's most notorious historical crimes. Sophia Reynolds rests in her marked grave in Oakwood Cemetery, where fresh flowers mysteriously appear on the anniversary of her discovery each year. No one has claimed responsibility for the floral tributes, though cemetery workers report occasionally glimpsing a tall, slender figure visiting the site at dawn on April 7th. The rebuilt Blackwood mansion served various purposes over the decades: school, community center, museum, before being purchased by a private foundation in 2002 for restoration as a historical landmark. The foundation's researchers continue to discover unusual features in the original portions of the structure: hidden spaces between walls, sealed compartments beneath floorboards, and narrow passages that seem designed for observation rather than passage. Most curious is the persistent report by workers and visitors of unexplained phenomena in the areas where the east and west wings once stood. The scent of roses and foxglove, the sound of a woman weeping, cold spots that defy modern heating systems, and occasionally glimpsed from the corner of one's eye the impression of a slender figure in white standing at windows that no longer exist, looking out across the grounds as if waiting for someone to arrive. Is it merely the power of suggestion affecting those who know the house's history? Or does something of Sophia Reynolds and her twisted bridegroom remain, bound to the place of their unnatural preservation? Bristol City records show an unusually high number of missing persons cases in the area surrounding the old Blackwood property, 17 unsolved disappearances in the past 50 years, with no bodies ever recovered. Police insist there is no connection to the historical case, yet longtime residents note a troubling pattern. Many of the missing were young women last seen near the estate, often after expressing interest in the Blackwood bride story. More disturbing still are the reports from construction workers and maintenance staff who have worked on the property over the years. Several have described finding small caches of unusual items hidden within the structure during renovations. Antique glass bottles containing unidentified chemical residues, medical instruments of outdated design, and in one case, a collection of wedding rings of varying ages concealed in a metal box behind a basement wall. Each discovery has been documented by the Historical Foundation, then quietly removed from public records at the insistence of the local tourism board, which fears negative publicity might damage Bristol's image as a charming historical destination. The most recent development in the long-standing mystery came in 2019, when ground-penetrating radar used during an archaeological survey of the Blackwood grounds revealed anomalies beneath the former carriage house. Spaces that appeared to be small rooms or chambers approximately 6 feet in length, arranged in a circular pattern around a central point. Initial excavation was halted when workers uncovered a metal plaque bearing an inscription that chilled even the most skeptical investigators. The Preservation Society, ST 1898, where love endures beyond mortal constraints. Below these words was a list of names, 23 in total, with dates ranging from 1898 to 1932. The first name on the list was Edward Blackwood. The last was Marcus Finch. County officials quickly covered the excavation and issued a statement citing structural concerns as the reason for suspending the archaeological work. The radar findings were sealed under a confidentiality order, and the Foundation's request for further investigation was denied. Rumors persist that what lies beneath the Blackwood estate is evidence of something far more extensive than one man's obsession, perhaps the headquarters of a secret society dedicated to preserving the objects of their desire through Dr. Finch's macabre techniques, a network of wealthy individuals who believed they could possess forever what would otherwise be lost to them. If such a society existed, did it die with Finch in the 1930s? Or did his journal, with its promise to leave the techniques for those who may continue the work, find an audience? Are there modern practitioners of the Blackwood preservation method, using updated techniques and contemporary chemicals to create their own eternal tableaus? The questions remain unanswered, the investigation officially closed. But in Bristol, Tennessee, locals still warn young women not to linger near the old Blackwood property after sunset. Parents tell children to avoid the estate's stone walls, behind which many believe more than memories are preserved. And on certain nights, when the moon casts long shadows across the mansion's reconstructed facade, some claim to see lights moving behind windows in wings that no longer exist, as if someone is searching the empty spaces where walls once concealed a bride in her wedding dress, waiting eternally for a ceremony that would never truly take place. For those who know where to look, there are signs that the Blackwood legacy continues. Obituaries in small-town newspapers occasionally contain coded phrases that echo the inscription on the Preservation Society plaque. Certain antique dealers specialize in wedding items with provenance too delicate to detail. And in exclusive online forums, collectors exchange information about acquiring preserved antiquities of a personal nature at invitation-only auctions. Is Sophia Reynolds truly at rest? Or does her story continue to unfold in hidden chambers across America, where those with wealth and obsession seek to preserve what cannot rightfully be kept? The questions echo through the halls of the Blackwood mansion. And somewhere, perhaps, a bride still waits in her wedding dress, preserved beyond the natural conclusion of love and life, a testament to the darkest possessiveness of the human heart. Remember, no matter how dark this world seems, there is always light to be found in faith. Turn to God and Jesus Christ for guidance when faced with the shadows of human obsession and cruelty. Only divine love offers true preservation of the soul without the corruption of possession. Should you find yourself drawn to learn more about the Blackwood Bride case, consider this warning. Curiosity has led many to the gates of that estate over the decades. Not all who entered have been accounted for. Some stories are best left in the past, some secrets better left sealed behind old walls. But if you must pursue the truth, never go alone. And perhaps carry with you a sprig of foxglove, not as poison, but as warning. For those who know its meaning, recognize it as a symbol of both death and preservation, a flower that adorned a bride who waited over 20 years to be discovered. The preservation techniques pioneered by Edward Blackwood and Dr. Marcus Finch may have evolved in the century since Sophia's discovery. Modern chemistry offers possibilities for preservation that Victorian practitioners could only dream of. The question is not whether such methods exist, but who might be using them and on whom. In the archives of Bristol's Historical Society, researchers continue to catalogue items recovered from the Blackwood estate. Among them is a leather-bound volume that remained sealed until 2021, when conservationists finally managed to separate the pages without destroying the brittle paper. The book appears to be a membership ledger for the Preservation Society, with entries spanning from 1898 to 1932. Each entry includes a name, date, and cryptic notation such as complete preservation, partial preservation, facial, or temporary preservation with renewal options. Most disturbing are the photographs glued to certain pages, images of men and women in formal attire, posed as if for wedding portraits or family photographs. The subject's unnaturally stiff postures and vacant expressions suggest these were not photographs of living people, but of preserved individuals, arranged to simulate life. The final page of the ledger contains a handwritten note, in what experts believe to be Marcus Finch's handwriting. The Society moves forward with the times. New methods, new locations, new appreciation for our art. The work continues under separate documentation, as modern scrutiny requires greater discretion. Those who seek us will find us. Those who need us will know where to look. The preserved will wait patiently for reunion with those who cherish them enough to join them in eternal tableau.